In this video, you'll learn how to use the TrendTimer automatic testing tool to discover the optimal parameters for TrendTimer strategies. Every TrendTimer strategy is configured using a set of parameters. Depending on which parameters are used, different results are obtained. There are billions of possibilities, so how can you know which parameter values work the best? The TrendTimer automatic testing tool can help, and I'll show you how this works. I'm on the testing screen here. Let's load a strategy that we can test and hopefully improve. So I'm going to visit the My Strategy screen. I'll click on the NASDAQ 100 strategies. Let's scroll to the bottom here and pick one. How about strategy 25 here? I'll click the link to load it. Now strategy 25 here, let's check the result. We can see the graph here. It's had a compound gain of 18.17%, which isn't bad, but let's see if we can improve upon this by choosing some different parameters. We can see the current parameters that are being used here. So to do this, we'll go to the Testing tab. This brings up the Automatic Testing tool. At the top here you can see test size. It's set to 100, but let's change this to 50. So we're going to run 50 tests. And the way this works here is that TrendTimer will test this strategy using randomized parameters. You can see all the parameters used in the strategy are here in the list. And there's a min and max value. And this determines the range that TrendTimer will use when it generates these random numbers. So in this case, the short average, TrendTimer will pick a value between 21 and 49. For long average, it'll pick a value between 106 and 246. You can set these manually to whatever you want. There's also an adjust min-max to plus or minus option here. It's currently set to 40. So what this means is the minimum random value will be 40% less than the current value, and the maximum will be 40% greater than the current value. If I click the up and down arrows here, you can see that the values above are being adjusted. So I'll change this to 50%. And now I'll run the test, but before I do, I'll scroll the screen down a bit here because I want you to see what happens below. When we run the test, the top 10 results that are discovered are saved in the box below here. So I'll click the Run Test button now and our test will begin. So our test is started and you can see the graph updating for each of the tests that are performed. And you can also see that the top tests are being saved in the box on the bottom right of the screen. You can also notice it in the graph. Most of the tests are beating the buy and hold result, which is in the green. Our test is just about done. So our test is complete. We can look at the top auto results section and see the top tests that have been saved. The top test had a compound annual return of 35%. The bottom test in the list is 22.39%. So all of these have beat the initial result. And if we want to load any of these tests, we can just click the link. So I'll click the link for the top test. Okay, that test is loaded. In addition to saving the results in the top 10 results box, the strategies are also saved on the My Strategy screen. And to find them, we need to remember what funds are used by these strategies. So we can see here that the third fund is KLAC. If I scroll up and look at the funds, so the third fund is KLAC, the fourth fund is CERN. If we visit the My Strategy screen and we scroll the list, we ought to be able to find this. Okay, so here's the item where the third item is KLAC and the fourth item is CERN. If I click this link here, that will load the strategies that we saved in the automatic testing. And if we want to load any of these, you can just click the link. I'm going to click the top item. So the strategy is loaded, and you can see that this strategy had a compound gain, or CAGR, of 35.34%. So that's really good. What this means is for this particular set of stocks that we've chosen and the parameters that are beneath it, this is the result that we received. But just because this set of parameters worked well for this set of stocks, that doesn't mean it will necessarily work as well when another list of stocks is chosen. If we go back to the testing screen, there's another kind of test I'd like to show you. And in this test, you can test how a single set of parameters works with a different set of stocks. So I'll show you how this works. I'll go to the testing screen. The first thing I'm going to do is check the checkbox next to all these parameters. And this will fix the value of each of the parameters. And the reason we want to fix the value for these parameters is because for the test we're going to run, we want to use the same parameter for each test. Okay, so the last test we did was a top 10 test. If I make a choice from the drop down here, you see there's list test as another option. So I'm going to select that. So you can see there's some new items that appeared here. The next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the params tab, and we have our fund list here. I'm going to remove all but the top 3 funds, and I'll show you why I'm doing this in a minute. So I'll just delete all of these but the top 3. Okay, so currently we have 3 funds: VFINX, the index fund; PTTRX, the bond fund; KLIC. Okay, I'm going to go back to the testing screen now, and I'll show you why I did this. I'm going to make a selection here, the Keep Funds option. I'm going to change it from No to Yes. And when I did this, you see that the number of random funds has defaulted to 9. So what will happen is when we run the test, it's going to keep our initial 3 funds that we have selected here for every strategy that is tested. And it's going to populate the remaining 9 slots with random funds or stocks. And these will be selected from the test list. So let's make another choice from the test list drop down here. And so let's select NASDAQ 100. When we run the test, it's going to make 9 random selections from the NASDAQ 100 list of stocks, and it's going to populate those into positions 4 through 12 in our strategy. So we need to give our test a name, and I'll explain why after we run the test. Let's just call it My New Test. Our test size is 50, and so we're ready to run the list test. So I'm going to press the Run Test button. So our test is running, and you can see the graph update, and in most cases the switched line is once again beating the green buy and hold line. But there's an important distinction to be made here between our previous test and this test. The first test we did was a top 10 test, and the top 10 tests help discover the optimal parameters for a set of stocks, and it does this by running hundreds of tests using randomized parameters. The list test is the opposite. It tests how a single set of parameters performs when used with different sets of stocks. And this is useful because it's good to know if a particular set of parameters that you've discovered through your testing works well just for a single set of stocks, or if the same parameters work great for multiple sets of stocks. And that's what we're testing here. So our list test is complete. And remember, we gave the list test a name, so it's called My New Test. And after the test is completed, it's saved, and we can find this on the My Strategy screen. So if I go to My Strategies, I can scroll the window down, and there it is, List Test, My New Test. If I click on this, I can see the results. So the right shows the results. They're sorted by total CAGR, compound annual growth rate, descending. So the top result was 55% annually. I can scroll down and see that the bottom result was negative 0.4%. So every one of these tests made money except for the bottom test. And there was only 3 tests that had lower than a 14% return, so that's pretty good. The bottom line shows you the average. So the average of these 50 tests is 26.72%. So that's very good. 26.72% is much higher than the 8.84% annual return for the buy and hold. Another thing to notice is that for the fund list, for all of the strategies we've saved here, they have the same first 3 funds. So VFINX, PTTRX, and KLIC. So remember, when we did the test, we specified 3 funds, and then on the testing, we specified that we wanted to keep the existing 3 funds and then add 9 random funds. So if we go back to my strategies, that's exactly what happened. And there's actually another method for performing a test that's very similar to the list test that we just completed. It's not exactly the same, and it's called cross-testing. On the My Strategy screen, you can see there's a cross-testing box here, and I'll show you how this works. So let's find the initial top 10 tests that we did. If you recall, the funds were VFINX, PTTRX, KLAC. So if I click this list, this brings us to the top 10 results that were saved during the top 10 tests that we did at the beginning of this video. So what cross-testing does, it does almost the exact same thing that the list testing did, but it doesn't have some of the same options. You'll recall that when we did the list test, we were able to retain the first 3 funds and then generate 9 random funds for the remaining positions. Well, when you cross-test, you're doing the same thing, but you don't have that same option. So the only choices are the number of tests. In this case, let's do 20. And then there's cross-test using, and then there's the drop-down for the list that you want to select the random funds for. So let's select NASDAQ 100 once again. So when we perform the cross-test, for every test, it's going to select 10 random funds from the NASDAQ 100 list. And it's going to perform 20 tests. And so the way we do this is we select the items that we want to cross-test. So I'm going to select all 10 of these. And we're going to perform 20 cross-tests for each of these strategies. So when we run the cross-tests, the parameters used in each of the tests are going to be the same, and the list of funds will change. So let's start the test, and I'll show you how this works. So our cross-testing is started, and unlike with the other testing that we did, you don't get to watch the graph being updated, but there is a progress bar here that shows the progress. So just to review what's happening here, we have 10 strategies saved. They all use the same list of stocks, but each uses a different set of parameters. And so for each of these 10 strategies, we're performing 20 tests using different random fund lists. This testing will take a few minutes to complete, so I'll stop the video and restart once it's done. So the cross-testing is completed, and to see the results I'll need to scroll the window a little bit. Okay, and so what you see here, there's 2 columns here with some blue hyperlinks. The first one is number of cross-tests, number CT. And so for each of these, we performed 20 cross-tests. And the next column is cross-test percentage. The number represents the average benefit each of the cross-tests have above the buy and hold result. So this isn't the compound annual return for these cross-tests. This is the advantage above buy and hold. So the actual compound return instead of 20.84 would be, 29 or something like that. So the cross-test percentage allows us to rank the strategies. And it looks like the highest cross-test percentage is in the second strategy in the list. And if we want to examine the results, we can click the link. So I'm going to click the link here. And this displays the 20 cross-tests that we performed for that strategy. So I can scroll back to the left and we can take a look at these. So notice that in the total column here, the bottom line shows the average. And so the average for each of these 20 strategies is 31.36%. So that's very good. We can sort these by clicking on the column header here. Okay, so this is sorting by the percentage in descending order. So the top performing test had a result of 56.02%. And if we want to view the strategy, we can just click the link. So in this video, we've learned how the top 10 tests can help discover the most profitable strategy parameters for a particular list of stocks. The top 10 most profitable strategies are saved. We can then use list tests and cross-testing, which allow us to validate a strategy by testing how a set of parameters performs when used with multiple different sets of stocks. Thank you for watching. For more information about the TrendTimer software and service, please visit www.trendtimer.com. The first test we ran was a top 10 test, but you see there's a test type drop down, and there's another kind of test we can run that I'd like to show you, and this is called the list test. So I'll make a selection from the drop down. Okay, so you see some new options appear here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click this checkbox next to each of these parameters. And by checking the box, what this does is it sets a fixed value for each of these parameters. So it's going to use the current value for each of these as we do the test. So I'll click all of these boxes. Okay, so you might be wondering, why would we want to fix the values? Let's go back to the My Strategy screen. There's one other thing I wanted to show you as long as we're here. You can see that the list of strategies is displayed in the box on the right here. And there's actually quite a bit of information here that is displayed about these strategies that you can only find here. You don't find some of this on the results screen or the testing screen. Some of it is shown only in this particular location. And I can show you some of what's here. So obviously the first column here is the strategy name. Next is the fund list. Then we have the 1 year through 5 year CAGR, and CAGR stands for compound annual growth rate. The compound annual growth rate is the year-over-year growth rate of an investment over a period of time. It can be thought of as a smooth return. And probably the easiest way to understand how it works is to visit one of the online calculators that you can use to calculate the CAGR for an investment. Here's one that shows a hypothetical investment that has a starting value of $10,000 and an ending value of $20,000 and a 5-year investing period. For this investment, the compound annual growth rate is 14.87%. So in this example, the investment would double from $10,000 to $20,000 over 5 years if each of those 5 years it gained 14.87%. After the 1 year through 5 year CAGR, the next column contains total CAGR. And this is the total CAGR since the beginning of the strategy back in 1994. So for this strategy, the total CAGR is 30.97%. So after total CAGR, we have total percent, that's the total percent gain. And then this is the compound return for buy and hold. There's many additional columns and I need to scroll the window for us to see them. Okay, so after the buy and hold number, there's the difference column. And what the difference column is, it's the difference between buy and hold and the total CAGR. So in this case, our total CAGR was 22% higher than the buy and hold. So we have the trade rule. We have the number of trades per year. That's important. You don't want to trade too often. We have the maximum drawdown for the strategy. We have the number of days the strategy has been in effect. We have the updated to date, the last signal date, the last signal instructions.